I can't believe the story is over 10 years old now. Time really does fly if you're not careful. So this story is probably one of the weirdest things that's ever happened to me, and at the time, it was incredibly scary as well. I had recently started dating my girlfriend, and due to our schedules, I rarely saw her, and as a young man in my 20s during the events of this story, I really wanted to see her. More than anything, I wanted alone time with her, and unfortunately, it just seemed like there was never a chance for us to be alone. I still lived at home with my parents, and so did she, so alone time wasn't really something we had much of. We had only been dating for a little while, and I was already annoyed. It seemed like she had something going on every night or weekend, and I just honestly felt like an afterthought to her. One weekend I told her how I was feeling, and she responded by telling me that she had planned on a camping trip with her friends, and that she was really sorry that we couldn't hang out again. I was furious, and at this point I was close to ending things with her before they had progressed any further. That day, she left for the trip, and she texted me and said, "Sorry, I know this is last minute, but my friend said that you could come if you want to meet us there." I absolutely hate camping, but I wasn't going to miss this chance to hang out with my girlfriend. The campsite was only about 40 minutes from my house, so I packed my bag and headed out there. This was a weird place. It wasn't like camping in the middle of the woods camping. It was in a sort of wooded area, but the campsite itself was the big giant clearing that had dozens of other people camping out. It didn't seem private and certainly didn't feel like camping to me, at least what I thought of when I thought of camping. Once I got there, this is where I first met all of her friends. They all seemed like great people, and I was kind of excited to hang out with all of them that night. They were the opposite of my girlfriend, though. She was quiet and reserved, and all of her friends were very outgoing and loud, and they all had an awesome sense of humor. While we were all hanging out, that is when I noticed a bunch of trails in the woods. Once I started walking some of the trails, I started to realize just how big this place was, and it finally started to feel like what I thought of when I thought of camping. Earlier that night, we grilled some food on a portable grill and played some card games. Once the sun set, we drank some beers in special containers since we weren't allowed to have alcohol. Around 11 p.m., two people came over to our little section of tents. I don't know if we should call them park rangers or what, but they were basically in charge of the campsite and the surrounding trails. They started to shine flashlights in our area very aggressively and wanted to know why we were still awake. We all laughed and looked at each other very confused. One of the guys who was there in this sort of arrogant voice said, "Why wouldn't we be awake? It's our vacation. We're planning on staying awake for a while, hanging out." One of the rangers, in a very aggressive voice, immediately jumped down his throat and said, "There's a strict 10 o'clock curfew. All lights out." We just laughed, still thinking this was some sort of weird joke. Her one friend, the same one who spoke up before, said again, "I paid all this money for this campsite, and you're literally making me go to sleep earlier? Why don't you get out of here?" I don't know if I would have had the same response, but we all felt the same way. The woman basically yelled at us like we were children. Frustrated, we all started making our way back into our tents. One of the friends said, "It's okay, guys, let's just meet in my tent and we'll play some cards and keep quiet." Well, the ranger must have heard her because she turned around, got right back in her face and said, "Lights out means lights out. No cards, no talking. It's time for bed. I'll be making rounds again soon. If you guys are still awake, you're gone." This was weird and ridiculous. I felt like some little kid, and I couldn't believe that those people were making grown adults go to sleep like this was prison or something. Once she walked away, everyone I was with was stewing with anger. We were behaving like she wanted, mainly because we had been drinking, and if she wanted to kick us out, we would have been screwed because none of us were okay to operate a vehicle. It wasn't long until everyone basically fell asleep except for me and my girlfriend, who were just enjoying our time together. Then she suggested something that I couldn't believe. She said that we should sneak onto one of the trails so we could have some true alone time. As I said before, I was a young man in my early 20s, so this was all I needed to hear. We quietly slid out of the tent and we sneakily made our way over to one of the nearby trails. Once we were a good distance from the start of the trail, we started to really enjoy our alone time. But then the enjoyment ended instantly. We heard a man shout, "Hey, and we both froze, trying not to bring attention to ourselves. We were sure that it was another park ranger, so we thought that it was best to just stay still. Then this deep voice spoke up again. "I know you're here. I just want to say hi." And we both each looked confused. What was that supposed to mean? I started to peek around one of the trees, even though it was nearly pitch black. Standing on the path with this little flashlight was a very strange-looking man. He was short and kind of wearing an oversized white t-shirt. While I was peeking, he made eye contact with me and saw me instantly. He stood straight up and smiled, and he said, "Hey, buddy, I got something for you." This situation was already weird, and I felt very tense being in the woods with this strange dude. I didn't respond because I had no idea what to say. And then he said one of the most convoluted things I had ever heard when he says, "I got all this money in my pocket. My ex-wife is going to take it, so I want to give it away before she finds out. Just come over here and grab it, would you?" He held out his hand, but it had nothing in it. He was about 20 feet away, so thankfully we weren't right on top of each other. I looked at my girlfriend and mouthed the words, "Run," to her. And as soon as she fled, I followed closely right behind her. Right as I went to take off, I looked at the guy, who shouted something like, "No!" And then he briefly lunged in my direction, but I was already sprinting away before he could even commit to some move. We ran as fast as we could out of the woods, and it never appeared like we were being followed, though. Once we got back to camp, we waited about an hour for the rangers to make a walkthrough, and I grabbed the lady from before and told her that some man was walking the woods. I lied and told her that I could see him from the tent, and she did believe me. They notified the authorities, and that's the last I saw of the creepy man in those woods. The rest of the night, my eyes were just glued in the direction of the trails, waiting to catch a glimpse of that stranger, but thank God I never did. I have no idea what he wanted that night, but the look in his eyes when we darted away was something I'll never forget. Every year around this time, when people start camping a lot, I'm reminded of that horrible encounter in the woods, and I'm just thankful that we were far enough away from him that we were able to get away safely.